Daniel stepped into the crowded hall, the buzz of laughter and conversation washing over him. The room was alive with celebration. His sister Lila's engagement party. It was supposed to be joyful, but for Daniel it felt like stepping into a battlefield. Lila had been mocking him ever since he arrived, her voice carrying over the music and chatter. She thrived on attention, on making others feel small so she could shine brighter. Tonight she had chosen him as her target. "Look who decided to show up," she said loudly, linking her arm with Adrian, her fiancé, and letting her words drip with mockery. The man of the hour. Or should I say, the man who's still stuck fixing old books and thinking he's important. The laughter from the surrounding guests felt like knives. Daniel forced a calm smile, but inside, a storm raged. He had tolerated Lila's jabs for years, but tonight something inside him snapped. Not in anger, not in shouting, but in cold recognition. He realized he had been patient long enough, silent long enough, and it was time for her to understand the weight of her actions. He had learned to hide, to stay quiet, to avoid confrontation. It had served him well for years, but every word from Lila was a reminder of something deeper. He remembered the day she had betrayed him, the day she had stolen from him, the one opportunity he had been chasing for years. Daniel had worked tirelessly, sacrificing time, sleep, and friendships, to earn a chance at a prestigious position role that could change lives. A position of respect and responsibility. He had dreamed of being a judge. Every late night, every grueling test, every hour spent in study had been dedicated to that goal. And then, without warning, Lila had walked in and claimed it. She had intercepted the final acceptance letter, the confirmation of his achievement, and in a twist of audacity, she had presented herself as the successful candidate. Daniel had never confronted her about it, had never allowed himself the satisfaction of exposing her lies. Instead, he had withdrawn quietly, determined to succeed on his own terms. Tonight, as she mocked him in front of the crowd, the memory of that betrayal hit him sharply. He thought about the years he had spent building his career quietly, the recognition he had earned without cheating, without shortcuts, without hurting anyone else. He had achieved everything honestly, and yet here she was, making him feel small once again. The irony was sharp and bitter. The crowd laughed again, and Daniel felt the sting of humiliation, but it was different this time. Instead of anger or despair, he felt clarity. He understood now that the person who had hurt him most didn't even know the truth of who he had become, and that truth would not remain hidden forever. He stepped away from the center of attention, moving toward the balcony, where the noise of the party softened. The cool night air hit his face, and he inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. The betrayal was old, but the wound felt fresh. He replayed the memory of Lila's theft in his mind, every detail sharp, the smug smile, the careful planning, the way she had convinced everyone around her that she deserved the recognition he had earned. It had taken him years to rebuild his confidence, to rise above the shadow of her deceit. Daniel's mind was a whirlwind of thought, racing through possibilities, outcomes, and consequences. Part of him wanted to confront her, to make her feel the embarrassment she had caused him. Another part of him whispered caution. Revenge was tempting, but it was not the same as justice. He had learned in his career that actions carried consequences, that choices defined a person. Acting in anger could cost him more than he realized. He leaned against the railing, looking down at the glittering crowd below. Lila was still at the center, laughing, speaking with her guests, completely unaware of the storm brewing in Daniel's mind. He watched her carefully, noting her confidence, her sense of control, the way she had mastered the art of appearing flawless. She wasn't evil. She had charm, intelligence, and charisma, but she was reckless with truth. careless with the feelings of those around her, and blind to the damage she had caused. Daniel thought about the years he had spent silent, patient, disciplined. He remembered every insult, every slight, every moment he had swallowed his pride for the sake of peace. And now, he realized that silence had not been protection. It had been permission. He had allowed her to believe she could control the narrative, that she could dominate the room with her mockery and lies. He clenched his fists, not in anger, but in determination. This time, things would be different. He would not act recklessly, but he would not remain invisible either. He would let the truth of who he was emerge naturally, in a way that could not be ignored. The thought sent a rush of anticipation through him, a quiet satisfaction that no insult, no mockery, could diminish. Daniel's thoughts drifted to Adrian, Lila's fiancé. A polite, composed man who believed he understood the world he was stepping into. He wondered what Adrian knew of Lila's tendencies, her sharp tongue, her tendency to belittle those closest to her. Perhaps he had no idea. Perhaps he would soon understand. The thought of revealing himself to Adrian, not out of malice, but out of truth, gave Daniel a sense of purpose. He could control the story now. He could step out of the shadows. He remembered the small moments from childhood, the times Lila had subtly undermined him, laughed at him, or taken credit for his ideas. It had always been her way to rise at someone else's expense. But Daniel had grown stronger, wiser, and more patient than she could have anticipated. Every slight had shaped him, prepared him, and now he was ready. The laughter from inside the party grew distant as Daniel focused on his next steps. He would not act impulsively. He would plan, observe, and wait for the right moment. His betrayal had taught him one important lesson. Power was not about loud words or flashy gestures. It was about timing, patience, and knowing the truth of one's own worth. Tonight, Lila had mocked him. She had laughed in front of everyone. But Daniel had something she didn't know. He had the title, the recognition, the proof of his years of hard work. And when the moment came, he would reveal it, not as revenge, but as undeniable truth. He straightened, feeling the night air settle around him. The world felt sharper, more alive, full of possibility. He had suffered, been humiliated, and been betrayed, but he had endured. And now, for the first time in years, he felt a quiet, steady sense of control. The betrayal had ignited something within him, not rage, not spite, but focus. Daniel took one last look at the party, at Lila laughing and gesturing, at Adrian standing nearby, oblivious. He allowed himself a small, confident smile. The storm had not yet broken, but it would. And when it did, the truth of who Daniel really was would no longer be hidden. For the first time that evening, he felt a sense of anticipation that wasn't fear. He felt power. Not the power to humiliate, but the power to reveal reality. He would not let the past define him, and he would not let Lila's arrogance overshadow the life he had built. And with that thought, Daniel stepped back into the shadows, ready to wait, ready to act, and ready to let the truth finally speak for itself. Daniel stood on the balcony, the cold night air brushing against his face as he watched the party below. Lila's laughter echoed through the hall, sharp and carefree, and he felt the sting of humiliation from earlier. He had survived her mockery, but it had awakened something inside him, a quiet, focused determination that wouldn't allow him to remain invisible any longer. He wasn't angry in the usual sense. He was calculating. Every insult, every snide remark had sharpened his mind, prepared him for this moment. He thought of all the years he had worked silently, building a life that nobody least of all Lila could undermine. He had risen through endless hours of study, courtroom battles, and late-night preparation, becoming someone his younger self could only dream of. A judge with authority, respect, and influence. Yet here he was, being ridiculed by the very sister who had once betrayed him, the one who had stolen from him the opportunity he had sacrificed everything for. The injustice of it still burned, but now he understood that any response had to be precise. He had a choice. He could confront her immediately, reveal everything in a dramatic confrontation, humiliate her in front of the guests, and claim immediate satisfaction. But years in law had taught him one thing. Timing was everything. Impulse was a luxury for those who didn't care about consequences. Daniel had learned patience. He would wait, watch, and act when the moment truly mattered. His thoughts drifted to Adrian, Lila's fiancé. Daniel had observed him all evening, polished, composed, and polite, but unaware of the storm he had stepped into. Adrian trusted Lila, perhaps too much. He believed in her charm and her brilliance, never suspecting the subtle cruelty she wielded so effortlessly. Daniel considered whether he should reveal the truth to Adrian. Let him see who Lila really was, not as an act of vengeance, but as a way to expose reality. The question of morality twisted inside Daniel like a blade. Was it revenge if it served truth? Could he reveal Lila's past without being cruel? Could he show Adrian the woman she truly was without tearing their relationship apart? He had wrestled with these questions for hours, pacing in his apartment before the party, imagining every scenario. Tonight was the culmination of years of silent strategy. Every decision mattered. He reflected on the betrayal itself. Lila had taken what he had worked for, his dreams, his recognition, his achievement. She hadn't been forced. She hadn't stumbled into it by accident. She had carefully intercepted the final acceptance letter, the confirmation of his success, and walked into a world that wasn't hers. Daniel had felt powerless at the time, but now he had the leverage. He could step forward and reveal the truth. He could reclaim his dignity. The temptation to do it immediately was strong, but he forced himself to wait. Daniel's mind raced, not with anger, but with strategy. He envisioned the moment Adrian would see the truth, when Lila's confident facade would crack. He imagined the tension in the room, the shift in energy as the guests realized that Daniel wasn't just the quiet, overlooked brother, he was someone with authority, someone who could no longer be mocked. The image gave him a strange satisfaction, a sense of control that he had never allowed himself to feel in the past. Yet beneath the calculated planning, there was uncertainty. Revenge carried consequences, and Daniel knew that better than most. He had witnessed families destroyed, friendships shattered, and careers ruined because of impulsive decisions. The story he was about to write would not just affect Lila. It would affect Adrian, the guests, and himself. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, forcing him to consider the cost of each action. He thought about the difference between justice and revenge. Justice was measured, impartial, fair. Revenge was personal, emotional, and often destructive. Daniel wanted satisfaction. Yes, but he also wanted truth. He wanted recognition not through spectacle, but through undeniable reality. He wanted people to see him as he had become, not the brother she mocked, but a man of authority, integrity, and control. The crowd below continued to laugh, oblivious to the silent storm brewing on the balcony. Daniel's patience held firm, but the tension inside him grew. Every second felt loaded with potential. He considered small ways to test Adrian's awareness, to hint at the truth without revealing everything too soon. Perhaps a casual remark, a question that made him pause, a look that carried unspoken weight. He wanted Adrian to see the cracks, to feel the discrepancy between the charming fiancé he believed in and the sister who had caused years of silent suffering. Daniel's internal debate continued. Should he act subtly, letting the truth seep out over time, or should he create a moment so undeniable that nobody could ignore it? The longer he waited, the more precise he could be. the greater the impact would be. But waiting also risked losing the moment. Timing was delicate, and patience could turn into hesitation. He had to balance strategy with instinct. He imagined Lila noticing the shift in Adrian, seeing her control weaken. He imagined the flash of recognition in her eyes when she realized that Daniel was no longer powerless, that he had grown beyond her reach. He thought about the years she had mocked him, dismissed him, and stolen from him. He felt no hatred, only the need for acknowledgement. He wanted her to understand that actions have consequences and that integrity cannot be stolen. Daniel considered the ethical dimension of his choices. Revealing the truth would hurt her, but it would also restore justice. Remaining silent would avoid immediate conflict, but perpetuate the illusion of power she had built on deceit. He weighed the outcomes carefully, acknowledging the emotional weight of each possibility. He did not want revenge for its own sake. He wanted the moral balance restored, the hidden truth recognized, the years of quiet effort acknowledged. He glanced back toward the party and saw Lila leaning toward Adrian, her laughter bright and carefree. Adrian was smiling, unaware of the storm of information Daniel held. The anticipation of that revelation gave Daniel a sense of focus. He would wait for the right moment, the moment when truth could be revealed fully, without distortion. Timing would be his ally, and patience would be his weapon. Daniel's thoughts then turned inward. He reflected on himself, on the growth and strength he had gained through years of adversity. The humiliation, the betrayal, and the mockery had shaped him, not broken him. He realized that his desire for revenge was not about hurting Lila, but about reclaiming his own dignity. He needed Adrian to see him as he truly was, and Lila to understand that her manipulations could no longer affect him. He planned each step carefully, imagining conversations, reactions, and the energy in the room. He would approach Adrian, drop subtle hints, and watch him process the truth. He would not act recklessly, but he would be undeniable. The time for patience was now, and the time for revelation would come at the perfect moment. The cold night air grounded him, bringing clarity to his thoughts. Daniel understood that this was more than just a personal vendetta. It was a test of character, a chance to demonstrate integrity, intelligence, and restraint. He was no longer the quiet, overlooked brother. He was a man of authority, capable of controlling the narrative without losing his moral compass. As he stood there, focused and calm, Daniel felt a strange combination of anticipation and serenity. The party continued below, laughter and music filling the hall, but he was detached, observing, planning, and waiting. Every insult Lila had thrown, every betrayal she had committed, had led to this moment. He was ready to reclaim his story, ready to reveal the truth, and ready to let the consequences unfold naturally. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, recognition, and control. He would show Adrian, show the guests, and most importantly, show Lila that he was no longer the person she could manipulate. The power of truth was on his side, and he intended to wield it carefully, decisively, and without malice. Daniel took a final deep breath, letting the cool night settle over him. He turned back toward the party, his mind sharp, his resolve unshakable. He would act, but only when the moment was right. The tension built within him like a coiled spring, ready to release at the perfect instant. And when it did, the world would finally see Daniel Hayes, not as a quiet, overlooked brother, but as a man who had endured, grown, and now commanded respect. Daniel stepped back into the ballroom, his mind sharp, his body calm, and his heart steady. Every inch of him was focused on the moment that had been building for years. The party continued around him, laughter echoing, glasses clinking, and music carrying through the hall. But to Daniel, All of that noise had faded into the background. Tonight, everything depended on timing, on precision, and on revealing a truth so undeniable that no one could ignore it. Lila was in her element, radiant and confident, the center of attention. Her guests hung on her every word, charmed by her wit, unaware that her facade was about to crack. Daniel watched her carefully, noting her gestures, the way she leaned slightly toward Adrian, how she radiated control and self-assurance. That control had always been her weapon, and for years, it had kept him silent. But tonight, he was no longer powerless. He approached Adrian quietly, a measured calm in his steps. Adrian looked up, startled, then smiled politely. "Daniel," he said, "enjoying the party?" Daniel studied him for a moment. Adrian was confident, kind, and unsuspecting. He trusted Lila completely. Daniel considered whether he should speak immediately or let the tension build. The more he waited, the greater the impact. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but carrying weight. "You trust people easily," Daniel said. "Do you ever wonder if you really know them?" Adrian frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. What do you mean?" Daniel let the pause hang in the air. "Your fiancée is charming, intelligent, capable. But does she always tell the truth?" Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Something in Daniel's tone unsettled him. "I don't understand," he said cautiously. Daniel's lips curved into a faint, controlled smile. "Sometimes people are not what they seem. Sometimes they hide behind a smile while taking credit for what isn't theirs. Sometimes the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, are the ones who have endured the most and achieved the most without anyone noticing." Adrian's brow furrowed. The words were subtle, but the implication hit him with increasing clarity. He glanced toward Lila, who was laughing with her guests, oblivious to the tension growing nearby. Daniel handed him a small card, crisp and official-looking. Adrian's eyes scanned it, and in that moment, his expression shifted. Shock, disbelief, and recognition all flashed across his face. Daniel watched carefully as Adrian's color drained, his confident composure cracking under the weight of the revelation. "Judge Daniel Hayes," Adrian whispered, barely audible. "You're the judge?" Daniel nodded, keeping his voice calm and steady. "Yes, and I earned it honestly. Something your fiancé once denied me." The reaction in the room was immediate. Guests stopped mid-conversation, eyes flicking between the three of them. The laughter that had filled the party moments ago was replaced with quiet murmurs and wide-eyed curiosity. Leela's smile faltered. She froze, her confident posture trembling slightly. For the first time that night, the power dynamic had shifted. Daniel, Lila stammered, her words failing her. The composure she had relied on for years was crumbling under the undeniable proof of his success. She had mocked him for so long, but now the truth stood before her, undeniable and heavy with years of effort and patience. Daniel's gaze was steady. He felt the temptation to humiliate her, to expose every detail of her past deception. He could let her social image crumble, let Adrian see every betrayal she had committed, every lie she had told. He could claim the satisfaction he had imagined for so long. But he paused. He realized that revenge, in its purest form, was destructive. It could provide temporary satisfaction, but it could also perpetuate pain, not only for Lila but for himself. He took a breath, grounding himself in the moment. The years of humiliation and betrayal had prepared him for this confrontation, but they had also taught him restraint. True power wasn't in punishment. It was in choosing the right moment and exercising control over one's own actions. "I'm not here to punish you," he said calmly. his voice carrying over the hushed room. "I'm here to show the truth. What you did years ago, that belongs to your conscience, not mine." The impact of his words settled over the guests. Lila's face, pale and tense, reflected the shock and guilt she felt. Adrian's eyes were wide, filled with respect and disbelief. He looked at Daniel, then at Lila, realizing for the first time that the woman he had trusted had deceived not just Daniel, but everyone around her. Daniel watched, his mind focused and clear. He felt a sense of liberation, not victory. The weight of past humiliation, the sting of betrayal, was lifting. He had control now, not through revenge, but through truth. And that control was far more satisfying than any act of retribution could ever be. Lila finally found her voice. I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible, her pride and confidence shattered. The apology wasn't loud or dramatic, but Daniel didn't need it to be. The acknowledgement of guilt, the recognition of consequence, was enough. He nodded slightly, accepting the apology silently. He could have made a spectacle, exposed every detail publicly, and humiliated her in front of everyone. But he chose restraint. He realized that vengeance would only continue the cycle of pain, whereas letting the truth speak for itself allowed for reflection, learning, and perhaps growth. The party slowly resumed its rhythm, the music and laughter returning, but something had changed. Guests whispered, exchanging glances, sensing the shift in dynamics. Adrian looked at Daniel with newfound respect, a subtle nod acknowledging the integrity and patience he had witnessed. Layla, meanwhile, remained quiet, the realization of her actions settling heavily on her shoulders. Daniel stepped away from the small crowd that had formed, moving toward the exit. He didn't gloat, didn't revel in the disruption. He simply walked calmly, feeling lighter with every step. The tension that had been building for years, the resentment and humiliation, had finally found release, not through revenge, but through truth and integrity. As he moved outside into the night air, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. He had confronted the betrayal, faced the opportunity for vengeance, and chosen a path that preserved his own dignity while revealing the truth. The moral clarity of his choice was its own reward. He understood now that revenge might bring momentary satisfaction, but it could never provide the lasting sense of justice and peace that comes from doing what is right. By revealing his success and allowing Lila and Adrian to process the truth, he had reclaimed his narrative, restored his dignity, and affirmed the value of patience, integrity, and restraint. Daniel paused outside, looking up at the night sky. The stars were quiet, steady, and unyielding. They reminded him of the path he had taken, long, challenging, but ultimately worth it. He had endured humiliation, betrayal, and mockery. Yet he emerged not broken, but stronger, wiser, and more in control of his own destiny. He realized that the true victory lay not in exposing Lila to shame, but in freeing himself from the burden of resentment. By choosing restraint, by acting with intention and integrity, he had turned a moment that could have fueled pain into one that reflected strength and wisdom. And with that understanding, Daniel stepped further into the night, leaving the party, the humiliation, and the past behind him. He walked not as a victim, not as someone seeking revenge, but as a man who had earned his place in the world, and understood the true power of truth, patience, and moral courage.